The undead have long been ingrained in human mythology as creatures that hold a special place in horror. Aliens and monsters are terrifying, but they are an external fear, something that comes out of the sky or out of the dark to attack. The undead are horrifying because they are us. Each myth explores the possibility of our humanity being turned against us, forcing us into a darker role. Vampires possess the ability to seduce you, steal your soul, and force you to the dark side. Ghosts trap your soul in the material plane. Zombies, however, hold a special type of horror. Becoming a zombie means not only losing your life or soul, but your free will. The curse of the zombie takes you from a living, breathing, thinking being to a shambling, thoughtless creature of instinct with less consciousness than any animal. You will destroy family and friends, or they will destroy you. This complete loss of self, then, is what gives the zombie genre its own special place in cinema. While other undead can star in horror movies, only zombies have developed their own genre. Only zombies are celebrated year-round, with posters, t-shirts, coffee mugs, bumper stickers, board games, and more. So, in honor of the zombie, its special place in history, and, most recently, the long-awaited 28 years later, let's take a look at zombies in cinema. From the very first movie to the current hits, from the horror movies to the comedies to the dramas, from the greatest gore to the bargain basement bus. Today we'll be exploring what exactly makes a true zombie movie, how they've changed over time, and how the current tropes developed. So, open up the door, Tom, because tonight we're gonna eat your brains. People often have strong feelings about what makes a real zombie movie. The trope, of course, is that zombies must be dead, slow-moving, and cannibalistic. Their bite produces infection, death, and transformation, usually in that order, and they have little in the way of fine motor skills, teamwork, or intelligence. However, the production of a zombie in movies has changed over time. Early movies were ambiguous, suggesting a combination of drugs, mysticism, and magic. This pivoted to a cinematic fascination with voodoo, though voodoo quickly became a catch-all term for any made-up ritual that involved brown people and drums. If a horror movie took place on an island, you could be sure there would be a comment about the natives practicing voodoo. Later, as the bomb became a topic on everyone's mind, science fiction/horror mashups like Creature with the Atom Brain became popular. Even later, developing fascinations with outer space and extraterrestrial life led to movies in which zombies were supposedly raised by aliens, or in which dead bodies were possessed by aliens. And more modern movies imagine zombies created due to disease, lab experiments, or other scientific-seeming methods. Movies like the Resident Evil series and World War Z moved away from tropes of the slow-moving zombie to fast zombies and hordes that could work together. 28 Days and 28 Weeks later envisioned zombies infused with rage that had all of the strengths and none of the weaknesses of The Walking Dead. And we cannot forget the low-grade movies and parodies involving zombie animals, horny zombies, zombie cyborgs. Parodies would play with common tropes, making zombie pets, child zombies, and even a zombie rom-com. Also, my favorite recent discovery, Cockneys vs. Zombies. Changing zombie tropes, and the breaking of these tropes is as old as zombie movies themselves. And rather than asking what makes a real zombie movie, the better question may be where they will go next. The history of zombies hails back to Haitian culture of the 1700s and early 1800s. Early zombies were not undead flesh eaters, but slaves forced to do manual labor. It is now believed these may have been people who were drugged, buried alive, and then dug up to work on sugar plantations. This was often said to be punishment for a serious crime. White Zombie, generally considered to be the first full-length zombie movie, is based on these early stories. Other movies, such as the French anti-war film J'accuse, showed scenes of the dead rising, but are not considered true zombie movies. It's uncertain if these scenes are even truly supposed to be zombies, or just vaguely defined visuals meant to symbolize some other movie message. White Zombie, on the other hand, uses the term zombie often, and the movie revolves entirely around this idea of people being dug up after burial. Starring Bela Lugosi, it follows the Haitian myth of being controlled by the will of another and forced to work, rather than the modern-day trope of an uncontrolled undead mass seeking to wipe out life. The victims in White Zombie are not even dead. They regain their will and renew their lives once the power over them is broken. Attempts at a sequel, Revolt of the Zombies, resulted in lawsuits and a drama worthy of its own video. Revolt was released in 1936, but despite the use of Bela Lugosi's eyes in the film and a very similar plot, it is not an official sequel to the movie. Both White Zombie and its not quite a sequel have an evil white man who possesses the natives to do labor for him. In both cases, he is eventually destroyed by his desire to possess a lovely woman who is married to another man. And in both movies, the ability to create these zombies is due to a secret herb or drug, but there is an implied magical power as well, since the master can then summon his slaves to him with a thought. White Zombie is considered a cult classic today, lauded for the performance of the amazing Bela Lugosi and for its groundbreaking role in horror. It is still recognized as being slow, with some poor acting and an atmosphere that likely would have fit better in the days of silent movies. Revolt of the Zombies is rarely mentioned. It was 1968 before another zombie movie would make history in the same way as White Zombie, but within those 30 years, over 36 movies claiming to be in the zombie genre were made. Many of these movies had little to do with the undead, however. Maniac, for instance, has one line from a secondary character about wanting her husband to be made into a zombie, and there is an early idea about bringing people back to life, but to save lives, not as zombies. Overall, the disjointed plot spends most of the time talking about mental illness rather than the undead. The major plot of Bowery at Midnight is that of a psychopath leading a triple life. He's a college professor, a caretaker of the poor, and a criminal mastermind. The plot revolves around his criminal enterprises, and only a tertiary character with a fascination for the dead even suggests zombies until the last 5 minutes of the movie. Most of these films discussed crime or mental illness. Often the plot revolved around hypnosis or had some vague ideas about organ transplants. The Ghostbreakers follows a similar pattern, with stories in the background of zombies existing, but the story being driven more by a criminal enterprise than the actual undead. It is worth a special mention, though, because this 1940s Bob Hope movie is considered to be the first comedic zombie movie. It was followed up in 1941 with the comedy King of the Zombies, which is a far more zombie-heavy storyline. Throughout all of these early movies, the idea of voodoo remains the prevalent basis for raising the undead. Even when science began to replace magic, it wasn't until the 1960s movie Dr. Blood's Coffin that zombies began to get seen as shambling corpses, rather than drugged or hypnotized victims. Interestingly, this was also one of the first 2 zombie movies to be made in color.
Drums, no breath to give. The dead don't rest. They've lost their dust. Relive.
1968 cemented the zombie movie as a genre for the more general movie-loving audience. Night of the Living Dead was the first full-length film for George Romero after a career of commercials and children's shows. Night of the Living Dead was one of the first movies to use a modern-day rural setting rather than an exotic tropical island or secret lab. This brought the horror of the movie closer to home. In addition, the zombies were dressed as the white middle-class neighbors many viewers would find familiar. Romero was also one of the first to envision zombies as the truly carnivorous walking dead, not eating brains necessarily, but with a ravenous hunger for human flesh. Finally, his casting of a black man in a lead role led many to believe the movie was actually about racial tensions rather than a horror movie. Whether true or not, this may have made it a more accessible movie to general audiences rather than a niche horror. He followed up Night of the Living Dead with Dawn of the Dead in 1978 and Day of the Dead in 1985. In each movie, the zombie apocalypse grows larger, moving from a single house in Pennsylvania to millions of zombies in Dawn of the Dead, and spreading to the entire world in Day of the Dead. In the final movie, it is implied the final chance for a cure fails, and there is little chance for humanity. After a 20-year break from the zombie genre, Romero returned to the world of the undead. In 2005, he directed Land of the Dead, visualizing the last of humanity living too comfortably with the zombies around them. The movie focuses heavily on the corruption that becomes possible when someone promises safety and normality. Meanwhile, the zombies are evolving. They show emotions over the death of their own, active hatred for humans, and tactics when attacking their prey. Some even learn how to use tools and guns. The battle between the last remaining humans and these masses is somewhat reminiscent of Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, questioning whether or not there are truly black and white monsters in this new world. While Romero's Dead series is often considered to have 6 movies, this is the last to follow a developing pattern of increased zombie infection. Diary of the Dead, released in 2007, returns to the beginning of a zombie outbreak with teenagers looking for a safe place while documenting the madness around them. The social commentary Romero was known for became far more heavy-handed, being outright spoon-fed to the audience multiple times, and often taking precedence over the main plot. In 2009, he followed up Diary with Survival of the Dead. A minor antagonist from the previous movie becomes the main protagonist here, just trying to lead his friends to a place of safety. Survival of the Dead becomes almost a comedy, doing little Romero's other movies hadn't already done, and with characters that are so over the top they are impossible to take seriously. Despite his final 2 attempts, Romero is generally respected not only as a horror director, but as a movie director overall. While several zombie movies have made the category of cult classics, Romero's are generally considered true classics. As with every genre, the zombie apocalypse has given rise to parodies and comedies as writers, directors, and producers try to find new ways to cash in on a popular topic. In fact, look up a list of the most popular zombie movies, and most of the time the comedies will make up half the list. The best known and most popular of these is probably Shaun of the Dead, a 2004 movie directed by Edgar Wright and starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Rather than a heroic lead, Shaun is the consummate everyman with a dead-end job and a loser best friend. His relationship is falling apart, and his life is going nowhere. Only with the breakdown of the entire social structure is he able to be seen as heroic, and even then, his heroism is more dumb luck than anything else. A lesser-known UK comedy is Cockneys vs. Zombies, which begins with a group of young people saving an old folks' home from being sold.
We're on a mission from God.
And ends with the old folks saving the survivors of a zombie apocalypse. The normal zombie tropes are replaced with senior tropes, including that one guy who was in the war and nothing else has lived up to the experience.
Shut up, you soppy tart. Those things out there are zombies.
In his case, a good zombie fight seemed to be just what he needed. Playing off Night of the Living Dead is Return of the Living Dead from 1985. Despite its production not being connected to the George Romero movie, it sets itself up as a direct aftermath. The movie begins with a dual storyline, the first of which involves incompetent workers trying to cover their tracks by burning an undead corpse. The smoke released into the air comes down with a rainstorm, unleashing a zombie outbreak on their town. The second storyline more closely resembles a teenage slasher film. A group of punk rock teenagers are caught in the cemetery as the dead rise around them, and of course, as with every good horror movie, the car won't start. An interesting side note, this is the first movie to actually have a zombie saying brains. One Cut of the Dead is a Japanese zombie movie about a low-budget movie team making a zombie movie. The actors are young and looking for their first movie break, but the director, called only Mr. Director, has chosen a secret government lab where experiments were done on humans to revive them from the dead. The cast and crew soon discovered this was not done by accident. The director decided the best way to coax real fear out of his cast is to put them in actual danger. When they lock themselves inside away from the zombies, he captures a zombie and unleashes it on them in order to record their emotions. The acting is ridiculous, the action is exhausting, and the movie doesn't even try to pretend to take itself seriously. Imagine live-action zombie anime. Only, then we reverse back in time to find out the entire movie is a live-action one-shot movie the director was hired to do. So yes, this is a fictional production hell making of a movie about making a movie while making a movie. Is it actually a comedy? I guess that depends on your humor, but it is definitely different and definitely weird. In 2002, after a period of hibernation, the zombie movie rose again with a low-budget surprise hit called 28 Days Later. Filmed on only $8 million, the movie starred a no-name actor no one had ever heard of, Cillian Murphy. Murphy had only been in a handful of independent films and stage performances before being cast in 28 Days Later, but his raw emotional acting helped to make the movie a smashing success. Well, his acting and the fast zombies. Resident Evil, which came out the same year, cost $33 million and ended its run with a box office total of $102 million. Despite being a well-known franchise since the mid-90s, it only tripled its money, while 28 Days Later took its tiny budget and grossed $68 million worldwide. If you happen to have lived under a rock for the last 23 years, or you were born after it came out,
I'm fucking old.
28 Days Later involves a group of extremist animal rights activists that break into a primate research center to rescue the monkeys there. They ignore warnings from a scientist that this is a bad idea.
The chimps are infected. They're highly contagious.
And as a result, they are bitten, turning almost instantly into blood-vomiting, snarling carriers of the virus. The initial outbreaks are believed to be rioting, understandably.
Experts fear all that might be needed to trigger a civil war is another terror attack.
28 days later, a naked man, later identified as Jim, awakens in a hospital. The hospital is empty, there appears to be no food, and once he wanders out onto the streets, the entire city appears to have been evacuated. He is eventually found by other survivors who explained what has happened and tells him there have been reports of similar outbreaks in New York and Paris. With the complete breakdown of society, the uninfected grow more desperate in their attempts to survive. Because the change is so fast, the ability to kill loved ones without hesitation becomes the only means of avoiding infection. Not only the society, but the people themselves begin to deteriorate until there is little that separates the infected from the humans. It is a visceral reminder that it doesn't take a zombie bite to do terrible things. Thanks to 28 Days Later, fast-moving zombies would quickly become a staple of the genre, with their slower-moving ancestors relegated mainly to comedies. Dawn of the Dead in 2004, 28 Weeks Later in 2007, World War Z in 2013, and, possibly the best of the follow-ups, the Korean-made movie Train to Busan. Some were better than others, but all helped to cement this new idea of the fast zombie as the social norm.
Fingers crossed with lifeless touch.
On occasion, attempts have been made to make zombie movies into something more than just another horror movie. Whether they go for a tearjerker, an artistic feel, or simply something more dramatic than a jump scare-filled horror movie, these rarely seem to do well with audiences. Where zombie comedies are met with high ratings and acclaim, attempts to give the undead or their families any depth are rejected almost universally. Maggie, released in 2015, should have had all of the elements to make it a popular movie. It starred an aging Arnold Schwarzenegger in a role that showed he hadn't completely become a parody of himself. In fact, critics praised Schwarzenegger's performance and his ability as a dramatic actor. The script won International Screenwriting Awards. The trailer received 4 million views in 4 days. Despite this, the movie only has a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. Repeated complaints are made in the reviews about the quiet pace, lack of action, and dark tone. In short, it isn't a traditional zombie movie. Inmate Zero is more conventional. It's set in a supermax women's prison where high-risk drugs are tested on inmates. Now, don't get me wrong, I will never argue this movie is good. It isn't. But it is different. An attempt at an artistic, surrealistic zombie movie definitely would never have occurred to me. Nothing is straightforward about the plot or the setting. It is set in a time with high-tech medical experimentation and when women can be wardens and special ops. Yet the doors open with mechanical keys, and the building looks ancient, and the phones are all rotary. Being unable to pin down when the movie takes place gives it a strange, detached feel. This is enhanced by the main character, Stone, having repeated visions or hallucinations throughout the movie. We can never be sure which. Many of the reviewers for this movie obviously struggled with the surrealism. It had been marketed as a straight zombie flick. Therefore, it was watched by the kind of person who likes horror, not the kind of person who watches artsy productions. While few people seem to have watched it, complaints about finding it confusing abound. Most of the other negative reviews are quite vague, suggesting they too may have been lost pretty quickly. Again, not that this movie doesn't have some major flaws, but they are a bit more complicated than this movie doesn't make sense. 2010's The Dead was a return to classic slow-moving, dead-eyed zombies. It's a movie with a beautiful background, but a bleak atmosphere. There is no reprieve for the protagonists, just false hopes. The dead can be outrun, but they will never stop coming. They will never get hungry, thirsty, tired, or feel pain. The movie is a slow burn, giving you time to really feel the weight of exhaustion, each loss of life, and the feelings of hopelessness. Every gorgeous sunrise exists only to reveal dead children, desperate survivors, and brutal decisions that have to be made. Imagine The Road if, instead of radiation, there were zombies. Like Maggie, the ratings for The Dead are surprisingly low. The Rotten Tomatoes audience has it at 45%, again with multiple complaints about the lack of action and the zombies not being scary enough. Strangely, a number of reviews gave it excellent write-ups, but then followed up with a low score. Fear is our most basic, rudimentary emotion. Horror movies, by their very definition, are meant to bring us to a primitive place within ourselves. Zombie movies are about the self and the fear of losing what makes us human, that intangible spark that makes us individuals. About a month ago, I was informed by an individual on the internet that no one expected or wanted horror movies to be actually scary. They seemed honestly disgusted that there might be emotions in a movie, especially a horror movie, that was more than just surface level. A horror movie that actually scares you? That shouldn't be a thing. I mention this because I don't think it's a unique belief to this person anymore. I also have a theory about how this unwillingness to be terrified has affected cinema overall. The movies that make us feel the most are the ones we remember, and the ones that influence the next generation of creators. Tropes we take for granted were once the groundbreaking creation of the previous generation, and many early horror movies have had real impact on our society even today. Look at the top box office movies in 1960. Psycho was the #2 highest grossing movie that year. Maybe people have heard of the other top 3 movies, but it's unlikely many people have seen them. And who can honestly say they have heard of, much less seen, more than one other movie on this list? Yet, Psycho is a movie many people today continue to watch. You'd have a hard time finding someone who hasn't heard of it. It affected future movie making in major ways. Most importantly, it actually scared people. Those who saw it in theaters at the time still talk about being afraid to take showers. Swiss Family Robinson was a family movie, and so it made significantly more money that year. But has it embedded itself in our consciousness in the same way? Night of the Living Dead had similar impact. While more movies from the top 15 of that year are still memorable, Night of the Living Dead didn't even make that list. But it has had far more of a long-standing influence on movies and society than Funny Girl. As people became less willing to sit with uncomfortable emotions, we began to hide them behind medication and instant gratification. Even the emotions evoked by movies feel like too much. We want to laugh at what should scare us. Box office hits are films that make quips to lighten the mood rather than sit with intense moments. The visceral terror that was once the loss of humanity becomes a joke about Bill Murray getting shot in the face. Movies have stopped reminding us about the meaning of being human. Instead, the goal is to consume content. Don't think too carefully about what you watch, and heck, why even leave your house to watch movies anymore? Movies are valued less for the power of cinema than their ability to create memes and pit people against one another. Do I think there should never be zomcoms? Of course not. But I do think that we have taken too much refuge in comedy. When was the last time you saw a film that didn't have a quip to break up the tension at some point during the movie? Personally, give me good old-fashioned, real fear any day.
They don't stumble, they don't slow, they don't sleep. Eyes like fire and their hunger runs deep.